She vanished after the ultrasound. Years later, a team rebuilt the billionaire CEO's system and his story. The boardroom was silent. 12 executives in tailored suits stared at their screens in disbelief. On the main display, lines of code scrolled faster than most could comprehend. A system being reborn before their eyes. "This is impossible," whispered the chief technology officer. "We've had 50 engineers working on this breach for weeks." Damien Vale stood motionless at the head of the table. His tie hung loose around his neck. His eyes were bloodshot from 3 days without sleep. The billionaire CEO of Vale Global Technologies, the man who had built empires with nothing but vision and ruthless determination, watched as his life's work was being saved by a ghost. "Who sent this?" he asked, his voice barely audible. The head of security cleared his throat. "Anonymous, sir. It came through our emergency line. No traceable metadata. No signature. Just this." Damien leaned closer to the screen. There was something familiar in the code. A pattern. A rhythm. A signature that wasn't a signature at all, but a way of thinking. A way of solving problems that he had only seen once before. His hands began to shake. "Raina," he whispered. "Oh God. Raina." The board members exchanged confused glances. No one recognized the name. No one except Damien, who felt the weight of 16 years of silence crushing down on him all at once. 16 years since she had disappeared. 16 years since he had stood frozen in that ultrasound room, unable to speak the words that might have changed everything. 16 years of building an empire while something far more precious slipped through his fingers. And now this. A system rebuilt from nothing. A solution appearing from nowhere. A ghost reaching out from the past to save him when he deserved to fall. "Sir." The board chairman's voice cut through his thoughts. "We still need to vote on your removal as CEO. The breach has caused incalculable damage to our reputation. Hospitals are still locked out of patient records. The government is threatening to revoke our contracts. Someone has to take responsibility." Damien wasn't listening. He was already walking toward the door. "Where are you going?" The chairman called after him. "We're in the middle of a crisis." Damien paused at the doorway. For the first time in days, his eyes held something other than defeat. They held purpose. "The crisis is over," he said quietly. "The solution is already implementing itself. Astronet will be back online within the hour. Better than before. Stronger than we ever built it." "But who?" "I need to find someone," Damien interrupted. "Someone I should have found 16 years ago." He walked out, leaving the board in stunned silence. The empire could wait. For once in his life, Damien Vale had something more important to do. But to understand how this moment came to be, how a billionaire CEO found himself being saved by a ghost from his past, we need to go back. Back to when Damien Vale was just becoming the man the world would one day know. Back to when Raina Calder was still a quiet brilliance waiting to be discovered. Back to the beginning of a love story that never got its proper ending. 16 years earlier, Damien Vale was already making waves in the tech industry. At 32, he had founded Vale Global Technologies with a vision that most considered impossible, a unified global infrastructure for medical records that could save millions of lives by ensuring doctors anywhere could access patient histories instantly. He was brilliant, driven, and utterly consumed by his vision. He worked 18-hour days. He expected the same from everyone around him. He built systems faster than most people could understand them. But he had never quite learned how to understand people the way he understood code. The University of California's annual tech symposium wasn't the kind of event Damien usually attended. It was too academic, too theoretical for his taste. But a potential investor had insisted they meet there, so Damien found himself wandering through halls filled with research posters and earnest graduate students. That's when he heard her voice. Your entire premise is flawed. You're assuming linear progression when the data clearly shows a recursive pattern. Damien turned to see a woman with dark hair and intense eyes standing in front of a presentation board. She was holding a pen and had apparently been scribbling equations on a napkin. The presenter, a man twice her age with an impressive title from a prestigious university, looked both offended and confused. I've been working on this algorithm for 3 years, the man protested. The woman shrugged. And you've been working on it wrong for 3 years. Look. She held up the napkin. If you adjust for the pattern recognition here and here, your error rate drops by 87%. Damien moved closer, intrigued. He glanced at the napkin and immediately saw that she was right. The algorithm was elegant in its simplicity, yet it solved a problem that had apparently stumped experts for years. The presenter sputtered some excuse and walked away. The woman sighed, crumpled the napkin, and tossed it in a nearby trash can. You're wasting a perfectly good solution, Damien said, retrieving the napkin. She looked at him with mild irritation. It's not a waste if no one's going to use it. I might. She studied him for a moment, recognition dawning in her eyes. You're Damien Vale. He nodded, surprised she knew who he was. Vale Global was still relatively new, still fighting for recognition in a crowded field. Raina called her, she said, not offering her hand. Research assistant in the Biomedical Innovation Lab. Just a research assistant? Damien asked, looking at the equations on the napkin. Just, she confirmed with a small smile that suggested she was perfectly content with her position. That smile caught him off guard. In his world, everyone was climbing, pushing, fighting to be more than they were. The idea that someone could be satisfied with just anything was foreign to him. Can I buy you a coffee? He asked impulsively. I'd like to hear more about this recursive pattern recognition. Raina hesitated, then nodded. Coffee. Not dinner. I don't date tech CEOs. Is that a category you've had to create a rule for? No. But I'm creating it now, preemptively. Damien laughed. It was the first genuine laugh he'd had in months. Coffee turned into 3 hours of conversation. Raina was brilliant in a way that made Damien feel both challenged and understood. She saw patterns where others saw chaos. She found solutions where others found only problems. And she did it all with a quiet confidence that required no validation. By the end of those 3 hours, Damien knew he wanted to see her again. And again. And again after that. Raina was more cautious. You live in a world of noise, she told him. I prefer quiet. I can be quiet, he promised. She raised an eyebrow skeptically. Can you? He couldn't, not really. But he could try. For her, he found himself willing to try many things he'd never considered before. Their relationship developed slowly. Dinners in hidden places where no one would recognize him. Walks at night when the world couldn't interrupt them. Conversations that lasted until dawn about everything and nothing. Damien had power. Raina had perspective. Together, they were whole in a way neither had been separately. For 8 months, they existed in a bubble of their own making. Damien kept her separate from his corporate life, not because he was ashamed, but because he treasured having something that belonged just to him. Something the board couldn't analyze, the investors couldn't evaluate, the press couldn't dissect. Raina understood. She had no interest in galas or board meetings or press conferences. She was content with their private world, where two minds could connect without the noise of expectation. But bubbles, by their nature, are fragile things. The day Raina discovered she was pregnant, she sat on the edge of her bathtub for an hour, staring at the test. She wasn't afraid of motherhood. She wasn't even afraid of single motherhood, if it came to that. What terrified her was the choice she knew Damien would have to make. Vale Global was preparing to launch Astronet, the culmination of years of work and billions in investment. The board was watching Damien with the sharpness of hawks, evaluating his every decision, questioning his every move. A pregnancy, especially one with a woman they didn't know, hadn't vetted, couldn't control, would be seen as a distraction at best, a liability at worst. Raina rehearsed 100 ways to tell him. She considered every possible reaction. She prepared for joy, for anger, for confusion. What she wasn't prepared for was silence. She invited him to the ultrasound, hands trembling with hope. She didn't tell him why. Just asked him to meet her at the clinic, said it was important. When the technician moved the wand across her belly and the sound of a heartbeat filled the room, Raina turned to Damien with tears in her eyes. His face went through a series of emotions too complex to name. Not rejection. Not joy. But fear. Fear of the board. Fear of scandal. Fear that his life, already under a microscope, would implode. He didn't ask her to leave. He didn't tell her to stay. He just stood there, silent. That silence broke her. Raina walked out of the clinic without a word. Damien followed her to the parking lot, finally finding his voice. Raina, wait. We need to talk about this. She turned to face him, her eyes dry now. No, we don't. Your silence said everything. I was surprised. I needed a moment to process. And in that moment, I saw your future. Our future. You, torn between the company and your family. Me, always wondering if I was your priority. Our child, growing up in the shadow of an empire. That's not fair, Damien protested. You're not giving me a chance to. To what? Choose. You already did. Not with words, but with silence. And silence is the one thing I can't build a family on. She got into her car and drove away. Damien stood in the parking lot, watching her go, still struggling to find the right words. Still believing he had time to find them. He was wrong. By nightfall, Raina's apartment was empty. Her number disconnected. Her lab cleared out. She had erased every digital footprint. A ghost carved from genius. Damien searched. He hired private investigators. He used every resource at his disposal. But Raina had disappeared completely, leaving no trace for even the most determined searcher to follow. He never knew her reasons. Never understood why she had chosen such a complete and final separation. Never got the chance to tell her that he would have chosen her, them, if only she had given him the time to find his voice. Instead, he buried himself in his work. He launched Astronet. He built Vale Global into a tech giant. He became the billionaire CEO the world expected him to be. But in quiet moments, when the noise of his empire faded, he still heard that heartbeat from the ultrasound room. Still wondered about the child he would never know. Still felt the weight of the words he hadn't said. Raina moved to a remote town 4 states away, determined to raise her child with peace rather than pressure. She found a small house on the edge of town, took a job at the local library that utilized only a fraction of her skills, and prepared to become a mother. Her son, Leo, was born on a quiet spring morning. He had Damien's eyes and Raina's smile. He was perfect. As he grew, it became clear that Leo had inherited both their brilliance, Damien's strategic thinking, Raina's pattern intuition, and a desire to understand systems more than people. He built circuits from broken toys, coded programs at age 9, and hacked his first quantum simulation engine at 12 just because it looked interesting. The world didn't know him. Not yet. He grew up in the quiet of a small town, his genius nurtured but not exploited, his mind free to explore without the pressure of expectation. Raina was careful about what she told him about his father. She never spoke with bitterness. Never painted Damien as a villain. She simply said, "Your father loved you in the ways he knew how. But he didn't know how to choose you. She never told Leo his father's name. Only that he lived in a world where power was loud and love was quiet. Leo accepted this with the same quiet thoughtfulness he brought to everything. He didn't ask many questions. But sometimes, Raina would catch him looking at his own reflection, searching for traces of the man he had never met. As Leo grew older, his genius became harder to contain within the boundaries of their small town. He devoured knowledge with an insatiable hunger. He built systems that shouldn't have been possible with the limited resources available to him. He saw patterns in the world that others couldn't even imagine. Raina watched with a mixture of pride and fear. Pride in the remarkable person her son was becoming. Fear that his brilliance would eventually lead him back to the world she had fled. The world of his father. She didn't know how right she was. 16 years after Raina disappeared, Vale Global stood at the edge of collapse. Astronet, the same system Damien had once sacrificed everything to protect, had a fatal flaw. A security breach so elegant that no one in the company could trace it. Hospitals lost access to patient histories. Clinics froze mid-operation. Government agencies panicked. The world blamed Damien. The board prepared to vote him out. For a man who had spent his life building systems, this was the one failure he couldn't fix. Damien hadn't slept in 72 hours when a private email landed in Vale Global's emergency line. Subject: stop looking for the breach. You're looking in the wrong place. Attached, a complete structural rebuild of Astronet. No signature. No traceable metadata. Just brilliance. The rebuild was flawless, a system redesigned to handle global strain without a single vulnerability. It was the kind of brilliance that couldn't be taught, only inherited. And that brings us back to the boardroom, where Damien Vale recognized a ghost in lines of code. Where he whispered a name he hadn't spoken aloud in 16 years. Where he walked away from an empire to find something far more precious. But how did this solution come to exist? How did a ghost from the past reach out to save the man who had once failed her? The answer was sitting in a small-town library, debugging systems on a donated laptop. Leo had watched the Astronet crisis unfold online. As a 15-year-old with an insatiable curiosity about systems, he had been following Vale Global's work for years, not knowing it was his father's company, just knowing it was interesting. When the breach was reported, Leo did what came naturally to him: he started thinking about how to fix it. He downloaded publicly available information about Astronet's architecture. He ran simulations. He looked for patterns. And he recognized something in the code. A way of thinking that felt familiar. A structure that resonated with his own mind. It was like looking at a reflection of himself in digital form. That's when Raina's whispers suddenly made sense. The father who lived in a world of power and systems. The man who hadn't known how to choose. Damien Vale. The creator of Astronet. Leo wasn't trying to save Damien. He was saving lives. Hospitals needed those records. Patients needed their histories. The system had to be fixed. So he rebuilt it. Not just patched the breach, but reimagined the entire architecture. Made it stronger. More resilient. Better than it had been before. The moment he ran the final simulation, Raina walked into his room and froze. "Leo, what have you done?" she whispered, recognizing Vale Global's logo on his screen. His voice was steady. "I rebuilt Astronet. And I think I rebuilt the man behind it too." Something in her broke, fear, grief, love, all tangled into one. She knew the world would come for them now. The quiet life she had built was about to become very, very loud. "You know," she said. It wasn't a question. Leo nodded. "I figured it out. The system, it thinks like me. Like us." Raina sat down heavily on the edge of his bed. "I was going to tell you when you were older. When you could understand why I left." I understand now, Leo said simply. You left because he couldn't choose. But Mom, what if he never got the chance to? Raina looked at her son, this remarkable person she had raised alone, this boy with his father's eyes and his own unique brilliance. She had protected him from Damien's world for 15 years. But perhaps, in doing so, she had also protected him from a part of himself. I've already sent it, Leo admitted. The rebuild. They need it. Raina closed her eyes. Then we wait. They didn't have to wait long. Vale Global Security traced the email signal, not fully, but enough to identify a regional tower in their small town. Damien got in his car and drove for 6 hours without telling a soul. When he reached the town, he didn't know where to start. It was small enough that a stranger in expensive clothes driving a luxury car would be noticed, but large enough that finding two specific people wouldn't be easy. He drove slowly through the main street, looking for, what? He didn't even know what Raina looked like now. 16 years was a long time. And the child, his child, would be a teenager now. A stranger with his blood. Damien parked outside a small cafe and went inside, hoping for information. The waitress eyed him suspiciously as he ordered coffee. Just passing through, she asked, setting the cup in front of him. Looking for someone, actually, Damien replied. A woman named Raina Calder. The waitress's expression shifted subtly. Recognition, then caution. Don't know anyone by that name. She was lying. Damien could tell. In his world, people lied to him all the time, about projections, about capabilities, about loyalties. He'd learned to recognize the signs. It's important, he said. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to talk to her. The waitress studied him for a long moment. Library, she finally said. Her son volunteers there most afternoons. Son. The word hit Damien like a physical blow. His son. A person who existed in the world because of him, yet whom he had never met. Thank you, he managed to say, leaving money on the counter. The library was a small building at the end of the main street. Nothing like the gleaming architectural marvels Damien was used to. Just a simple structure with a sign that read Oak Ridge Public Library, in faded letters. He hesitated at the entrance, suddenly unsure. What would he say? How could he explain 16 years of absence? What right did he have to disrupt their lives? But he had come too far to turn back now. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The library was quiet, with only a few patrons browsing the shelves. An elderly librarian sat at the front desk, peering at him over reading glasses. Can I help you? She asked. I'm looking for. Damien paused. He didn't even know the boy's name. Raina Calder's son. The librarian's eyes narrowed slightly. Leo. He's in the computer lab. Back corner. Leo. His son's name was Leo. Damien walked through the stacks toward the back of the library. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He turned the corner and saw the computer lab, a small room with 3 outdated desktops and a table where a teenager sat working on a laptop. The same eyes. The same hands. The same intensity when thinking. Damien's world stopped. Leo looked up. They stared at each other, father and son who had never met yet somehow recognized each other instantly. Damien's voice cracked, Did you fix Astronet? Leo nodded cautiously. Someone needed to. A movement in the shadows caught Damien's attention. Raina stepped forward, fear and history in her eyes. She looked different, older, of course, with strands of gray in her dark hair. But still beautiful. Still the woman who had haunted his dreams for 16 years. Damien whispered her name like a prayer, Raina, why did you leave? Her voice broke. Because I wanted to raise him somewhere silence didn't destroy him the way it destroyed us. The words hit Damien with the force of truth. His silence in that ultrasound room. His inability to speak when it mattered most. His failure to choose what truly mattered. "I looked for you," he said quietly. "I know," Raina replied. "I made sure you wouldn't find us." Leo watched this exchange with the careful observation of someone who had spent his life analyzing systems, including human ones. "You're Damien Vale," he said. Not a question. A statement of fact. Damien nodded. "I am. You built Astronet." "I did. But you rebuilt it. Better than I ever could." Leo shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. The architecture was sound. It just needed to be viewed from a different perspective. Damien recognized that shrug. It was his own gesture of deflection when faced with compliments. This boy, this brilliant, remarkable boy, was undeniably his son. "How did you know?" Damien asked. "That I was your father." Leo finished for him. "I didn't. Not until I started working with Astronet's code. Then I recognized something. A pattern. A way of thinking that felt familiar." Raina stepped closer to her son, protective. "I never told him your name. I never wanted him to feel the weight of your legacy. But you told him about me. I told him the truth. That you loved him in the ways you knew how, but you didn't know how to choose him." Damien flinched. "That's not fair. I never got the chance to choose." "You had the chance," Raina said quietly. "In that ultrasound room. You chose silence." The three of them stood in the small computer lab, surrounded by outdated technology and the weight of 16 years of absence. A family that never was. A possibility interrupted. Leo closed his laptop. "The patch is implementing itself. Astronet will be fully operational within the hour." "Thank you," Damien said. The words felt inadequate for what this boy, his son, had done. "You saved more than a system. You saved lives." "That's why I did it," Leo replied simply. Damien looked at Raina, then back at Leo. He had rehearsed a dozen speeches on the drive here. Had planned what he would say, how he would explain, what he would offer. But standing here now, face to face with the family he had lost, all those carefully prepared words felt hollow. So instead, he spoke the truth. "I've spent 16 years building an empire," he said. "Systems that connect the world. Technologies that save lives. Innovations that change how people live. And none of it matters as much as what I lost in that ultrasound room." Raina's expression softened slightly. "Damien. Please," he interrupted. "Let me finish. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for a second chance. I'm not even asking to be part of your lives if that's not what you want. I'm just asking you to know that not a day has passed that I haven't thought about you. About the child I never knew. About the family we could have been." Leo watched his father with those familiar eyes. Damien's eyes, taking in every word, every gesture, every nuance. "What do you want?" Leo asked directly. Damien looked at his son. "I want to know you. If you'll let me. I want to hear about your life. Your interests. Your dreams. I want to be whatever you'll allow me to be in your life. And if that's nothing, then I'll respect that. But I had to try. I had to find you. I had to tell you that the silence that drove your mother away wasn't rejection. It was fear. And it's the biggest regret of my life." Raina moved to stand beside her son. "Leo, this is your decision. Whatever you choose, I'll support you." Leo considered for a long moment. The library around them was quiet, the world outside continuing as if this moment wasn't reshaping 3 lives forever. "I have questions," Leo finally said. A lot of them. Damien nodded. I'll answer all of them. As honestly as I can. And I'm not leaving here, Leo continued. This is my home. My life is here. I understand. But. Leo hesitated. I'd like to know you too. To understand the other half of where I come from. Something tight in Damien's chest began to loosen. Not hope, not yet. But possibility. Thank you, he said softly. Raina watched this exchange with complex emotions playing across her face. Fear. Caution. And something else, a recognition that her son needed this. Needed to know the man whose blood ran in his veins. Needed to complete the picture of himself that had always been half-formed. We should talk, she said to Damien. Properly. There's a lot you don't know. Damien nodded. I have time. It was the first time in 16 years he had said those words and meant them. In his world of board meetings and product launches and crisis management, time was the one resource he never had enough of. But for this, for them, he would make time. He would create it if necessary. They left the library together, an awkward trio bound by blood and genius and 16 years of absence. They walked to a small park nearby, finding a bench where they could talk without being overheard. And talk they did. 4 hours. As the sun moved across the sky and shadows lengthened around them, they began the slow, careful work of understanding each other. Leo asked his questions. About Vale Global. About Astronet. About Damien's life before Raina. About the world he had built while they were building their own. Damien answered everything. Honestly. Completely. Without the corporate filters he usually applied to his words. He told Leo about the empire he had created, but also about the emptiness at its center. The success that felt hollow without someone to share it with. Raina filled in the gaps of Leo's childhood. The first steps. The first words. The moment he built his first circuit at age 4. The science fairs he dominated. The teachers who recognized his genius and the ones who felt threatened by it. As they talked, something began to shift between them. Not forgiveness, not yet. Not reconciliation, not completely. But understanding. The beginning of a bridge across 16 years of silence. When the streetlights came on, Raina checked her watch. It's getting late. We should head home. Damien nodded, reluctant for this moment to end but knowing it had to. Would it be alright if I came back tomorrow? Raina looked at Leo, who nodded. Yes, she said. We'll be home. They exchanged contact information, a simple act that felt monumental after 16 years of disconnection. Damien watched them walk away, Raina with her arm around Leo's shoulders, his son already taller than his mother. He sat on the bench for a long time after they left, trying to process everything that had happened. His phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Vale Global. The board wanting updates. The press demanding statements. The world continuing to spin while his had been completely transformed. None of it seemed important anymore. He had found them. His family. The people he should have chosen 16 years ago. The people he would choose now, if given the chance. The next morning, Damien returned to Raina's small house on the edge of town. He brought coffee, remembering exactly how she liked it, and a tentative hope that this day would build on the foundation they had laid yesterday. Leo answered the door, looking at the coffee cups with amusement. Mom's in the kitchen. She already made coffee. Damien smiled ruefully. Some things never change. He followed Leo inside, taking in the details of their home. It was modest but warm. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes on everything from quantum physics to classic literature. A chess set sat on a small table by the window, a game in progress. Photos of Leo at various ages decorated the mantel. A visual timeline of the years Damien had missed. Raina was at the kitchen table, working on a laptop. She looked up when they entered, her expression guarded but not unwelcoming. "You came back," she said, echoing her words from yesterday. "I told you I would," Damien replied, setting down the unnecessary coffee cups. "Yes, you did." She closed her laptop. "Leo has school today, but he wanted to see you before he left." Leo shrugged, trying to appear casual though his eagerness was evident. "I have some ideas about Astronet's long-term architecture. Improvements that could be implemented over time." Damien felt a surge of pride. "I'd love to hear them." For the next half hour, Leo walked Damien through his ideas. They were brilliant, innovative approaches that Damien's best engineers hadn't considered. Solutions to problems Vale Global hadn't even identified yet. Damien listened, asked questions, offered suggestions. It was the most natural conversation he'd had in years. Two minds that worked in similar ways, building on each other's thoughts, creating something neither could have developed alone. When it was time for Leo to leave for school, he hesitated at the door. "Will you be here when I get back?" The question held more weight than its simple words suggested. "Will you stay? Will you be consistent? Will you be the father I never had?" "Yes," Damien promised. "I'll be here." After Leo left, Damien and Raina sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The ease of the conversation with Leo faded, replaced by the complicated history between them. "He's remarkable," Damien said. Raina nodded. "He is. You did an amazing job raising him." "I did what I had to do." Damien leaned forward. "Raina, I need to understand. Why did you disappear so completely? Why didn't you give me a chance to make it right?" Raina was quiet for a long moment, considering her words carefully. "Because I saw your world, Damien. I saw what it did to you. The constant pressure. The impossible expectations. The way you had to compartmentalize your life to survive it. I didn't want that for my child." "Our child," Damien corrected gently. "Yes. Our child." She sighed. "When you stood in that ultrasound room and said nothing, absolutely nothing, I realized something. You were trapped. Between the person you wanted to be and the person your world demanded you be. And I couldn't build a family on that foundation. So you left. I protected our son. I gave him a life where he could be himself without the weight of expectations. Where his genius could develop naturally, not be exploited. Where silence didn't mean rejection." Damien absorbed her words, recognizing the truth in them. "I would have tried, Raina. If you had given me the chance, I would have tried to be what you both needed." "Would you have succeeded?" she asked quietly. He couldn't answer that. Not honestly. The man he had been 16 years ago, driven, ambitious, focused solely on building his empire, might not have been capable of being the father Leo deserved. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I'd like to think I would have grown into it. The way I hope to grow into it now." Raina studied him. "You've changed. 16 years will do that. So will almost losing everything you've built. So will discovering you have a son who is brilliant enough to save your life's work without even trying." A small smile touched her lips. He wasn't, not even trying. He worked on that rebuild for 3 days straight. Barely slept. Barely ate. He has your focus when something captures his interest. And your ability to see patterns no one else can see. They fell into a more comfortable silence, the sharp edges of their history beginning to soften. "What happens now?" Raina finally asked. Damien had been thinking about this question since the moment he'd walked out of that boardroom. "That depends on what you both want. What you'll allow. I won't force my way into your lives. I won't disrupt what you've built here. But I want to be part of Leo's life. In whatever capacity he's comfortable with. And I want. He hesitated. I want a chance to know you again. The person you've become. Not to pick up where we left off, too much has happened for that, but to see if there's still something between us worth exploring. Raina didn't respond immediately. She got up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street where she had built a life far from Damien's world. Vale Global needs you, she said. Your board is probably in chaos right now. Your investors are demanding answers. Your employees are waiting for direction. They can wait, Damien replied. For the first time in my life, I'm putting something else first. She turned to face him. That's what I needed 16 years ago. That's what Leo needs now. I know. And I'm here. Not for a day or a week, but for as long as it takes. For the rest of our lives, if you'll let me be. Raina's expression softened. I'm not making any promises, Damien. Neither is Leo. We have a good life here. A quiet life. The kind of life where silence is peaceful, not destructive. I understand. But, she continued, we can try. Slowly. Carefully. One day at a time. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was a beginning. A chance. More than Damien had dared to hope for when he drove to this small town searching for ghosts. Thank you, he said simply. The days that followed established a tentative rhythm. Damien rented a small apartment in town, refusing the luxury accommodations his assistant had tried to arrange. He wanted to be part of this world, not impose his own upon it. Each morning, he would join Raina and Leo for breakfast. Each afternoon, he would meet Leo after school, listening to his ideas, sharing his own knowledge, building a bridge across 15 years of absence. Each evening, after Leo went to bed, he and Raina would talk. Carefully at first, then with growing openness as old wounds began to heal. Vale Global continued to function without him. The board was in an uproar, of course. The press speculated wildly about his absence. His executive team scrambled to maintain stability. But for once in his life, Damien didn't care. The empire could wait. This couldn't. On the fifth day, Leo asked the question Damien had been dreading. Why didn't you look for us harder? They were sitting in the local diner, sharing a meal that had become part of their new routine. Damien set down his fork, knowing this moment required complete honesty. I did look, he said. I hired investigators. I used every resource I had. But your mother. He glanced at Raina. She's brilliant. She knew exactly how to disappear. But you're Damien Vale, Leo pressed. You have billions of dollars. Connections everywhere. You could have found us if you really wanted to. The accusation hung in the air between them. Damien could have defended himself. Could have explained the lengths he had gone to. Could have shifted blame. Instead, he acknowledged the truth. You're right, he said quietly. I could have done more. I could have made finding you my absolute priority. I could have put everything else on hold until I succeeded. And I didn't. I let the company consume me. I let the search become secondary. And that's something I'll regret for the rest of my life. Leo absorbed this, his expression unreadable. At least you're honest about it. I promised I would be. About everything. Even the things that don't paint me in a good light. Raina watched this exchange with a mixture of pain and pride. Pain at the reminder of those early years when she had lived in constant fear of being found. Pride in her son's directness and in Damien's willingness to face his failures. I made it very difficult, she said, offering Damien a small mercy. I changed our names. I used cash only for years. I avoided digital footprints. I chose this town specifically because it was the kind of place no one would think to look. You were protecting him, Damien acknowledged. I understand that now. Leo looked between his parents. Would you have told me eventually? If I hadn't figured it out myself? Raina hesitated. Yes. When you were older. When I thought you were ready to decide for yourself what relationship you wanted with your father. And would you have tried to find me then? Leo asked Damien. In a heartbeat, Damien replied without hesitation. If I had known you existed, if I had had any idea where to look, nothing would have stopped me from being part of your life. Leo nodded, seemingly satisfied with these answers. He returned to his meal, the moment of tension passing as quickly as it had arrived. But something had shifted. A question had been asked and answered honestly. A wound had been acknowledged. A small step toward healing had been taken. As the days turned into weeks, these moments accumulated. Small truths. Difficult conversations. Gradual understanding. The careful construction of relationships that should have existed all along. Damien learned to navigate this new world, a world where his name carried no weight, where his wealth meant nothing, where he was valued not for what he had built but for who he was trying to become. Leo began to open up more, sharing not just his ideas but his feelings. His frustrations at growing up without a father. His curiosity about the world Damien came from. His fear that this newfound connection might disappear as suddenly as it had appeared. Are you going back? He asked one evening as they walked home from the library. To Vale Global. To your real life. Damien stopped walking. This is my real life, Leo. Being here. Getting to know you. The company is just a thing I built. It's not who I am. But you have responsibilities. People who depend on you. Yes. And I'll have to address those eventually. But not at the expense of what matters most. Leo studied his father's face, looking for deception and finding none. What if I came with you? Just to visit. To see what you built. Damien felt a surge of hope. I'd like that. If your mother agrees. She might, Leo said thoughtfully. She's starting to trust you. A little. That night, Damien broached the subject with Raina as they sat on her porch, a habit they had developed over the past weeks. Leo wants to see Vale Global, he said. Just a visit. I told him it would be up to you. Raina was quiet for a long moment. I've kept him away from that world for so long. Protected him from it. And now I'm considering letting him walk right into it. It would be on his terms. On your terms. Just a visit, not a commitment. She looked at him. And then what, Damien? We go back to our quiet life here and you return to running your empire. How does this work long term? It was the question they had both been avoiding. The practical reality behind their careful reconnection. I don't know, Damien admitted. I just know that I want to be part of his life. Part of your life, if you'll let me. The details, we can figure those out together. Raina sighed. He's curious. He always has been. And he's 15 now. Old enough to start making some of these decisions for himself. So that's a yes. It's a, we'll discuss it with him tomorrow. As a family. The word family hung between them. A possibility. A hope. A future neither had imagined possible just weeks ago. The next morning, they sat down with Leo and laid out the options. A visit to Vale Global. A chance to see the world his father had built. With clear boundaries and the understanding that he could leave at any time. Leo considered this with the careful deliberation he brought to all decisions. I want to go, he finally said. I want to see it. But I want Mom to come too. Raina looked surprised. Leo, I don't think. Both of you, Leo insisted. Together. That's my condition. Damien and Raina exchanged glances. They hadn't been alone together in Damien's world since those early days of their relationship. The prospect was daunting for both of them. But this wasn't about them. It was about Leo. About giving him what he needed to understand his heritage. Both sides of it. All right, Raina agreed. Both of us. 3 days later, they boarded Damien's private jet, a concession to practicality rather than luxury. Leo explored the aircraft with undisguised fascination, examining every feature, asking questions about the engineering, the navigation systems, the communication technology. Raina sat quietly, watching her son's excitement with a mixture of joy and apprehension. This was the world she had fled. The world she had protected him from. And now she was bringing him directly into it. Damien sat beside her, respecting her silence. "He'll be fine," he said softly. "He's stronger than both of us." "I know," Raina replied. "That's what scares me." The flight was short. The drive from the airport to Vale Global headquarters, shorter still. But in that brief journey, Damien felt the weight of worlds colliding. His past and his present. His professional life and his personal one. The empire he had built and the family he had lost. As they pulled up to the gleaming tower that housed Vale Global, Leo pressed his face to the window, taking in the scale of his father's creation. "You built all this?" he asked. "With a lot of help," Damien replied. "From people much smarter than me." "Not smarter than me though," Leo said with a hint of his father's confidence. Damien laughed. "No. Probably not smarter than you." They entered through a private entrance, avoiding the press that had been camped outside the main doors since Damien's disappearance. The executive floor was quiet, most of the staff having gone home for the day, a deliberate choice on Damien's part to minimize the circus this visit could become. His executive assistant, Helen, was waiting for them. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of Raina and Leo, but she recovered quickly. "Welcome back, Mr. Vale," she said professionally. "The board has been asking for you. And the press office has about 300 requests for statements." "They can wait," Damien replied. "Helen, this is Raina Calder and Leo Calder. They'll have full access to anything they want to see." Helen nodded, understanding the significance without needing explanation. "Of course. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Refreshments?" "We're fine," Raina said. "Thank you." Damien led them through the executive floor to his office, a large space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was designed to impress, to intimidate, to reinforce the power of the man who occupied it. Leo walked around the room, examining everything with curious eyes. "This is where you work?" "When I'm not in meetings," Damien confirmed. "Which isn't often." "It's very big." "Too big," Damien agreed. "I've never needed this much space. But it's what people expect from a CEO." Raina stood by the window, looking out at the city below. "It's exactly as I imagined it would be," she said quietly. "Impressive. Imposing. Isolated." Damien moved to stand beside her. "It is. I never realized how isolated until recently." They stood in silence, watching the city lights begin to twinkle as dusk fell. 16 years ago, they might have shared this view as partners. Might have built this empire together. Might have raised their son in this world of power and privilege. But that wasn't the path they had taken. And standing here now, Damien wasn't sure it would have been the right one. "I want to see Astronet," Leo said, breaking the moment. "The actual servers. The infrastructure. Not just the code." Damien nodded. "We can do that. The main server farm is in the basement. Highly secure, but I can get us in." They took the private elevator down to the lowest level of the building. As they descended, Damien explained the security protocols, the redundancy systems, the fail-safes that protected the most valuable asset Vale Global possessed. When the doors opened, they stepped into a different world. Gone was the polished luxury of the executive floor. Here was pure function. Rows of servers humming with the data of millions of patients, the medical histories that could save lives or end them if compromised. Leo walked through the server room with reverence, understanding better than most the power contained in these machines. "This is what I saved," he said softly. "This is what I rebuilt." "Yes," Damien confirmed. "Your code is running on every one of these servers now. Your architecture is protecting all of this data." Leo turned to his father, a question in his eyes. "Did you tell them?" "The board. Your engineers. Did you tell them who wrote the rebuild?" Damien shook his head. "No. I told them I was investigating the source. That's all they needed to know until we decided how to handle this." "Handle what?" Leo asked. "Your future," Raina interjected. "Your identity. Your connection to Vale Global. These are decisions that will affect the rest of your life, Leo. They're not to be made lightly." Leo considered this. "What if I want to work here someday?" "Not now. After college maybe. What if I want to be part of this?" The question hung in the air between them. The possibility that had been unspoken until now. That Leo might choose to enter his father's world. That he might want to claim his heritage. That the careful separation Raina had maintained for 16 years might end. "If that's what you want," Damien said carefully, "there will always be a place for you here. But it would be on your terms. Not as my son, if that's not what you want. But as yourself. As the brilliant person you are." Raina watched her son's face, seeing the conflict there. The pull of this world with its resources and possibilities. The comfort of the quiet life they had built. The desire to know his father. The loyalty to his mother. "You don't have to decide anything now," she said gently. "This visit is just that, a visit. To see. To understand. The rest can come later." Leo nodded, relieved. "I just wanted to know if it was possible." "Anything is possible," Damien said. "That's something I've learned recently." They continued the tour, visiting the research labs where new technologies were being developed, the conference rooms where global strategies were decided, the cafeteria where employees gathered to share ideas and build connections. Throughout it all, Leo absorbed everything with the intensity that was so characteristic of him. Asking questions. Making observations. Connecting dots that others might miss. And Raina watched. Not just her son, but Damien. The way he moved through this world he had created. The respect he commanded. The vision he articulated. The man he had become in the years since she had known him. By the time they returned to Damien's office, it was late. The building was nearly empty. The city outside was fully dark, illuminated only by the lights of other skyscrapers and the stars above. "What do you think?" Damien asked Leo. "It's impressive," Leo admitted. "All of it. But. It's not very human. It's all systems and structures. Where are the people in all of this?" Damien was taken aback by the question. It was insightful in a way he hadn't expected. "The people are what make it work," he said. "But you're right. The way we've designed it, the way I've built it, it's focused on the systems more than the humans they serve." Leo nodded. "That's what I fixed in Astronet. I didn't just patch the security breach. I redesigned it to be more responsive to human needs. More intuitive. More empathetic." Damien looked at his son with new understanding. This wasn't just technical brilliance. This was something deeper. A perspective he himself had never fully grasped. "You're right," he said. "And that's something Vale Global needs more of. Something I need more of." Raina smiled slightly, recognizing the lesson her son was teaching his father. The same lesson she had tried to teach him years ago. That systems existed to serve people, not the other way around. As they prepared to leave, Damien's phone rang. He glanced at it and frowned. It's the board chairman. I should take this. He stepped away to answer, his voice low but authoritative as he explained that yes, he was back, and no, he wasn't available for a meeting tonight, and yes, they would discuss everything tomorrow. When he returned, Raina was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. What? He asked. Nothing, she said. Just, remembering. They left Vale Global the way they had entered, quietly, through the private entrance, avoiding the press and the questions and the demands of the world Damien had built. The drive back to the hotel was silent, each of them processing the day in their own way. Leo, considering the possibilities he had glimpsed. Raina, reconciling the world she had fled with the reality she had seen. Damien, seeing his life's work through new eyes. At the hotel, they parted ways, Raina and Leo to their suite, Damien to his own room. But before they separated, Leo hugged his father. A real hug, not the awkward embrace of strangers but the connection of family. Thank you, he said. For showing me. Damien held his son, feeling the weight of 15 years of absence and the lightness of possibility. Thank you for wanting to see it. Later that night, there was a knock on Damien's door. He opened it to find Raina standing there, looking uncertain. Can we talk? She asked. He stepped aside to let her in. Of course. She walked to the window, looking out at the city lights, so different from the quiet darkness of their small town. Leo's asleep, she said. He was exhausted. So much to process. It was a lot for one day, Damien agreed, keeping a respectful distance. For all of us. Raina turned to face him. I need to know what happens next, Damien. Not just tomorrow or next week, but in the long term. Leo he's fascinated by your world. I can see it in his eyes. He's imagining himself here. Would that be so terrible? Damien asked gently. It might be, Raina replied. This world consumed you. It nearly destroyed you. It's demanding and relentless and unforgiving. And Leo, he's brilliant, yes. But he's also 15. He's still finding himself. Damien nodded, understanding her fear. I won't let it consume him the way it consumed me. I promise you that. How can you promise that? You're the CEO of a global corporation. The board is already demanding your return. The press is speculating about your absence. How long before the demands of this life pull you back in completely? It was the question Damien had been asking himself since the moment he'd driven away from Vale Global 3 weeks ago. How to balance the empire he'd built with the family he'd found. How to be present for Leo without abandoning the responsibilities he'd created. I'm stepping down as CEO, he said quietly. Raina stared at him. What? Not immediately. But I've been thinking about it for a while now. Even before I found you and Leo. The company has outgrown me. It needs different leadership for its next phase. You're giving up Vale Global. Just like that. Not giving it up. Transitioning. I'll still be on the board. Still be involved in strategic decisions. But the day-to-day operations, the constant crises, the endless demands, I'm ready to let those go. Raina studied his face, looking for signs of deception or uncertainty. She found none. You're serious. Completely. I've already started discussions with potential successors. The announcement will come in the next few months, once the transition plan is in place. And then what? You move to our small town and pretend to be a normal person. You, Damien Vale, billionaire tech mogul. There was a hint of the old Raina in her tone, the woman who had challenged him, questioned him, pushed him to be better than he was. Damien smiled. I don't know about normal. But yes, I want to be closer to Leo. To you, if you'll allow it. Not in your space, not disrupting the life you've built, but nearby. Available. Present. Raina shook her head, not in denial but in disbelief. You've really changed, haven't you? I've had 16 years to think about what matters. And then I almost lost everything I'd built in a single day. It clarifies things, that kind of experience. She moved away from the window, closer to him. And what about us, Damien? Where do I fit in this new vision of yours? It was the question he'd been afraid to ask. The possibility he'd been afraid to hope for. Wherever you want to fit, he said honestly. I'm not presuming anything, Raina. I know too much has happened. Too much time has passed. But I never stopped loving you. Even when I couldn't find you. Even when I thought I'd never see you again. And if there's any chance, any possibility that we could. He trailed off, unable to find the right words. Unable to ask for more than he deserved. Raina was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, she finally said. I don't know if I can trust this. Trust you. Trust that this change is real and lasting. I understand. But, she continued, I'm willing to find out. Slowly. Carefully. For Leo's sake, and maybe for our own. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't a promise of reconciliation. But it was an opening. A possibility. A future that hadn't existed 3 weeks ago. That's all I can ask for, Damien said softly. They stood in silence, the city lights casting shadows across the room. Two people who had loved each other once. Who had created a remarkable child together. Who had found each other again against all odds. I should go back to Leo, Raina said. In case he wakes up. Damien nodded. Of course. She moved toward the door, then paused. Thank you. For today. For showing him your world without trying to keep him in it. It's his choice, Damien said. It always will be. After she left, Damien stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the city he had helped build. The empire that had consumed him for 16 years. The world he was now preparing to step back from. He didn't regret it, the work, the innovation, the lives saved by the technologies Vale Global had created. But he regretted the cost. The years lost. The family he had never known. Now he had a second chance. Not to rewrite the past, but to create a different future. A future where systems serve people, not the other way around. Where silence didn't destroy what mattered most. A future with his son. And maybe, just maybe, with the woman he had never stopped loving. The next morning, they flew back to the small town that Raina and Leo called home. As the private jet descended, Damien looked out the window at the landscape below, so different from the urban sprawl he was used to. Quieter. Simpler. More human. Leo sat beside him, still processing everything he had seen the day before. I want to go back, he said. Not to stay. Just to learn more. To understand how it all works. Damien nodded. Whenever you want. The door is always open. But I also want to stay here, Leo continued. This is home. Mom is here. My friends are here. My life is here. I know. And I would never ask you to leave it. Leo looked at his father with those familiar eyes, Damien's eyes, full of questions and possibilities. So how does this work? You in your world, us in ours. I'm working on that, Damien said. But I promise you, we'll figure it out. Together. When they landed, Damien's driver was waiting to take them back to Raina's house. But as they approached the small home on the edge of town, they saw something unexpected, a crowd of reporters gathered on the street. What the hell? Damien muttered. Raina tensed beside him. How did they find us? The driver pulled over a block away, out of sight of the media circus. Damien turned to Raina and Leo, his expression grim. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I don't know how they found out. I was careful." We all were. Leo looked out the window at the reporters with their cameras and microphones. "They know who I am, don't they? They know I'm your son." Damien nodded. "It seems that way." Raina's face had gone pale. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. This is why I left in the first place. To protect him from this." "I'll handle it," Damien said firmly. "I'll make a statement. Draw them away. Give you both time to." "No," Leo interrupted. "We handle it together. All three of us." Raina and Damien both looked at their son in surprise. "Leo, you don't have to do this," Raina said. "We can find another way." "Mom, they already know. They're already here. Hiding won't make them go away. It will just make them more determined to find us." Damien studied his son with a mixture of pride and concern. "He's right, Raina. Once the story is out, there's no putting it back. But we can control how it's told. We can set the terms." Raina looked between her son and his father. So alike in their determination, their strategic thinking, their willingness to face challenges head-on. "All right," she finally agreed. "Together. But we keep it brief. We give them just enough to satisfy their curiosity, and then we ask for privacy." Damien nodded. "I'll follow your lead." They drove the remaining distance to the house. As they pulled up, the reporters surged forward, cameras flashing, questions being shouted from all directions. Damien stepped out first, his presence commanding immediate attention. Raina followed, her head held high despite her obvious discomfort. Leo was last, standing between his parents, facing the world that had just discovered his existence. "Mr. Vale. Is this your son? Is it true he saved Astronet? How long have you known about him?" The questions came rapid fire, overlapping, demanding. Damien raised his hand, and the crowd fell silent. A testament to the authority he commanded even here, far from his corporate domain. "I'll make a brief statement," he said. "And then we ask for your respect and privacy." He looked at Raina, who nodded slightly, giving him permission to continue. 16 years ago, I made a mistake. I let fear and ambition separate me from the woman I loved and the child I didn't know existed. 3 weeks ago, that child, now a brilliant young man, saved Vale Global from a catastrophic system failure. In doing so, he brought his mother and me back into each other's lives. Damien paused, looking at Leo with undisguised pride. "This is my son, Leo Calder. He has been raised by his remarkable mother, Raina Calder, who has given him everything I couldn't. I am now being given a second chance to be part of his life. A chance I don't deserve but am profoundly grateful for." He turned back to the reporters. "That's all you need to know. The rest, our relationship, our future, our private lives, is not for public consumption. We ask that you respect our privacy and allow us the space to build our family on our own terms." The reporters erupted with more questions, but Damien, Raina, and Leo were already moving toward the house. Together. A united front against the intrusion of the outside world. Once inside, with the door firmly closed against the chaos, Raina turned to Damien. "That was, well handled. I've had practice with the press," he said ruefully. "Though usually about product launches, not personal revelations." Leo went to the window, peering through the curtains at the reporters still gathered outside. "Will they leave?" "Eventually," Damien said. "Once they realize we're not giving them anything more. But it might take a few days." Raina sighed. "So much for our quiet life." "I'm sorry," Damien said. "This is exactly what you were trying to avoid all these years." "It was inevitable," she replied. The moment Leo sent that rebuild, the moment you found us, this was always going to happen. I just hoped we'd have more time to prepare. Leo turned from the window. So what now? We just wait for them to get bored and go away. Damien considered the question. We have options. We can stay here and wait it out. We can go somewhere else temporarily. I have properties where privacy is guaranteed. Or. Raina prompted. Or we face it head-on. We control the narrative. We give one comprehensive interview to a journalist we trust, answer all the questions on our terms, and then refuse to engage further. Raina and Leo exchanged glances, a silent communication that Damien was still learning to interpret. What do you think? Raina asked her son. Leo shrugged. I think hiding never solved anything. And I think if we're going to be a family, whatever that looks like, we need to define it ourselves, not let others define it for us. Damien felt a surge of emotion at the word family. It was the first time Leo had used it to include him. I agree with Leo, he said. But this affects all of us. It has to be a unanimous decision. One interview, Raina said. On our terms. And then we ask for peace. And so it was decided. One carefully controlled interview with a respected journalist known for her integrity. One opportunity to tell their story, the love that began with possibility, the ultrasound that changed everything, the child raised in shadows, the system that brought them back together. The interview was published a week later. It was honest, vulnerable, complex, just like the family it portrayed. It spoke of mistakes and regrets, of genius and resilience, of a love interrupted and a family finding its way back to each other. And then, as promised, they withdrew from the public eye. The reporters eventually left. The story eventually faded from the headlines. Life, in its own way, returned to a new kind of normal. Damien kept his word. He began the process of stepping down as CEO, identifying a successor who shared his vision but brought fresh perspective to Vale Global. He purchased a small house on the outskirts of town, close enough to be present in Leo's life, far enough to respect the boundaries Raina had established. Leo continued to thrive. His genius, no longer hidden, found new outlets. He collaborated with Vale Global's research team remotely, developing innovations that would save lives without sacrificing his life in the small town he called home. He visited his father's world occasionally, learning about the empire that was part of his heritage without being consumed by it. And Raina. Raina watched. She watched her son grow into a young man who understood both worlds, the quiet and the loud, the simple and the complex. She watched Damien transform from the ambitious young CEO who had failed her into a man who prioritized family over empire. She watched herself begin to trust again, to hope again, to consider possibilities she had long since abandoned. 6 months after the interview, on a quiet evening when Leo was at a friend's house, Damien invited Raina to dinner. Not at his house or hers, but at the small cafe where they had first spoken when he arrived in town. Why here? She asked as they sat at a corner table. Neutral ground, he replied with a small smile. And I wanted to talk to you. Just you. About us. Raina tensed slightly. Damien. Please, he interrupted gently. Just hear me out. She nodded, waiting. These past 6 months have been extraordinary, he said. Getting to know Leo. Building a relationship with him. Watching him grow and learn and become even more remarkable than he already was. And I'm grateful for every moment of it. But it's not just about Leo. It never has been. From the moment I saw your name in that code, from the moment I realized you might still be out there somewhere, it's been about you too. About us. Raina looked down at her coffee. Damien, so much has happened. So much time has passed. We're different people now. I know. And I'm not asking for what we had before. I'm asking for a chance to discover what we might have now. As the people we've become. She looked up at him, studying his face. The face she had once loved. The face she had seen in her son every day for 15 years. The face that was now looking at her with hope and fear and a vulnerability the old Damien would never have shown. What exactly are you asking for? She said. A date, he replied simply. A real one. Not as co-parents discussing our son. Not as old friends reconnecting. But as two people who might still have something worth exploring. Raina was quiet for a long moment. I don't know if I can separate those things. You're Leo's father. That will always be true, regardless of anything else between us. I know. And I'm not asking you to separate them. I'm asking you to consider that there might be room for both. That we might be more than just co-parents. That what we once had might still exist, in some new form. She looked out the window at the small town she had chosen as her refuge. The place she had raised her son. The home she had built far from Damien's world. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of you, but of this. Of opening that door again. Of what it might mean for all of us if it doesn't work. I'm scared too, Damien said. But I think some things are worth being scared for. Raina turned back to him. One date, she said. Just to see. No promises. No expectations. Damien smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. That's all I'm asking for. One date became two. Two became three. Slowly, carefully, they began to rediscover each other. Not as the people they had been 16 years ago, but as the people they had become. Damien, less driven by ambition, more grounded in what truly mattered. Raina, still protective but learning to trust again, to open herself to possibilities she had long since abandoned. They took it slowly. Dinners at quiet restaurants. Walks through the town Raina had made her home. Conversations that lasted late into the night, rebuilding the connection that had once come so naturally to them. Leo watched this development with cautious optimism. He never pushed, never expressed expectations, but his eyes held hope when he saw his parents together, laughing, talking, rediscovering the chemistry that had brought them together in the first place. Are you and Dad getting back together? He finally asked Raina one evening after Damien had dropped them off following a dinner out. Raina hesitated. I don't know, Leo. We're exploring that possibility. Would it be okay if you did? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. With me, I mean. Raina looked at her son, this remarkable young man who had grown up without a father and was now navigating the complex reality of having one. What do you think? Would it be okay with you? Leo considered the question with his usual thoughtfulness. I think I'd like to know what it's like. To be a real family. All three of us. The words touched something deep in Raina's heart. A longing she had suppressed for 16 years. A possibility she had never allowed herself to consider. We'll see, she said softly. Whatever happens, you will always be the most important person in my life. In both our lives. Leo nodded, satisfied with this answer. I know. But it's okay to want things for yourself too, Mom. Not just for me. Raina hugged her son, marveling at his wisdom. When did you get so smart about people? I've been studying them, Leo replied with a small smile. They're more complex than systems, but the patterns are there if you look for them. As the months passed, Damien settled into his new life. The transition at Vale Global progressed smoothly. His successor, a brilliant woman who had been with the company for years, brought fresh energy and perspective to the role of CEO. Damien remained on the board, offering guidance when needed but no longer consumed by the day-to-day demands of running a global corporation. He found, to his surprise, that he didn't miss it as much as he had expected. The constant pressure. The endless crises. The weight of thousands of employees and millions of users depending on his decisions. He had lived in that world for so long that he had forgotten what it was like to exist outside of it. Now he had time. Time to get to know his son. Time to rebuild his relationship with Raina. Time to discover who Damien Vale was when he wasn't defined by the empire he had created. He bought a small building in town and converted it into a tech incubator for local students. A place where young minds could explore and create without the pressure of commercial success. Leo was a frequent visitor, working on projects that combined his father's strategic vision with his mother's pattern recognition. It was at this incubator, nearly a year after Damien had first arrived in town, that he and Raina found themselves alone one evening. Leo had gone home earlier, leaving them to lock up. "He's working on something big," Damien said as they walked through the quiet space. "He won't tell me what it is, but I can see it in his focus." Raina smiled. "He gets that from you. That intensity when something captures his interest. And the brilliance to actually solve it. That's all you." They reached the main door, and Damien turned off the lights. In the dim glow of the emergency exit signs, they stood facing each other. "Raina," Damien said softly. "There's something I need to ask you." She looked at him, waiting. "This past year it's been the best of my life. Getting to know Leo. Building this place. And most of all, rediscovering you. The woman I never stopped loving, even when I thought I'd lost you forever." Raina's breath caught. They had been careful in their rekindled relationship. Taking things slowly. Never rushing. Never presuming. But the feelings between them had grown stronger with each passing day. "What are you asking, Damien?" He took her hands in his. "I'm asking if you're ready. Ready for us to be more than what we are now. Ready for us to be a family, you, me, and Leo. Not living in separate houses. Not carefully navigating boundaries. But together. Truly together." Raina looked into his eyes. The same eyes she saw in her son's face every day. Eyes that had once looked at her with love, then with fear, and now with hope. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of you. Not anymore. But of changing what we have. It's good now. It's working. What if we try for more and lose everything? What if we don't?" Damien countered. "What if this is just the beginning of something even better? Something we were always meant to find our way back to?" Raina was quiet for a long moment, considering his words. Considering the journey that had brought them to this point. The ultrasound room where silence had broken them. The boardroom where code had reconnected them. The small town where they had rebuilt trust, one day at a time. "Yes," she finally said. "I'm ready." Damien's face lit up with a joy so pure, so unguarded, that it took Raina's breath away. This was not the ambitious CEO who had once chosen his company over her. This was the man she had always known he could be. The man who had finally learned to choose what truly mattered. He pulled her close, and for the first time in 17 years, they kissed. Not with the passion of youth, but with the deeper connection of two people who had lost each other and found their way back. Two people who had created something remarkable together, not just a child, but a second chance. When they told Leo the next day, his reaction was simple and profound. He hugged them both, then said, finally. "The system is complete." They laughed, recognizing the technical metaphor that was so characteristic of their son. But they also recognized the truth in his words. They were a system, three interconnected lives that functioned better together than apart. The transition wasn't immediate. They took their time, making sure Leo was comfortable with each step. Damien didn't move into Raina's house right away. Instead, they began spending more time together as a family. Weekends. Holidays. Ordinary Tuesday nights that became extraordinary simply because they were shared. 6 months later, they found a new house, not Raina's, not Damien's, but theirs. A place that belonged to all three of them. A home built on choice rather than circumstance. On the day they moved in, Leo presented them with a gift. A small device he had built himself, housed in a simple wooden box. "What is it?" Raina asked as she opened it. "A system I've been working on," Leo explained. "It's a digital family archive. It stores memories, photos, videos, audio recordings. But it does more than that. It analyzes patterns. Finds connections. Builds a narrative from fragments." He pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared above the box. Images began to form, Raina as a young woman, presenting at the tech symposium where she and Damien had met. Damien building Veil Global from nothing. Leo as a baby, a child, a teenager. Moments from the past year as they had found their way back to each other. "I've been collecting these," Leo said. "From public archives. From Mom's old hard drives. From Dad's corporate records. Building our story." The images shifted, showing the three of them together. Recent memories. New beginnings. "It's not just about the past," Leo continued. "It's designed to grow. To add new memories. To build our future." Raina and Damien looked at their son with wonder. This remarkable person they had created together. This brilliant mind that saw patterns where others saw only fragments. This heart that had found room to love a father he had never known and to forgive a mother who had kept secrets to protect him. "It's perfect," Damien said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's us," Raina added softly. Leo smiled, a smile that combined his mother's warmth and his father's confidence. "I call it rewritten. Because that's what we've done. We've rewritten our story." As the holographic images continued to shift and flow, the three of them stood together, watching their past and their present merge into a future none of them could have imagined a year ago. A family that had been broken by silence. A system that had been saved by brilliance. A story that had been rewritten by love. Damien put his arm around Raina, who leaned into him with the comfort of someone who had found her way home after a long journey. Leo stood beside them, no longer the child raised in shadows but a young man stepping confidently into the light. Together, they watched as the system Leo had built continued to weave their story, not erasing the past, but incorporating it into something new. Something whole. Something that had been waiting 17 years to be completed. Some systems don't crash, Damien thought, remembering the words that had come to him when he first found Raina and Leo. They wait to be rewritten. And in that moment, surrounded by the family he had almost lost forever, Damien Veil, the billionaire CEO who had built empires and lost what mattered most, finally understood the most important system of all. Not the one he had created. Not the one his son had saved. But the one they had rebuilt together. A family. Rewritten. Complete. If this story moved you, share with someone who believes in second chances. That's how love multiplies. Subscribe to Mr. Ellington Love Lines for more stories that heal, inspire, and remind you, broken things can still bloom. Leave a comment with one lesson you've taken from the story. Your reflection might inspire our next episode.